Welcome to Mindrolling. This is our new podcast. I'm Raghu Marcus.
I'm David Silver.
And today we have a wonderful old family friend, someone from my India days, and someone David has been very close to for quite a number of years, Shyamdas. And David, we're going to let you give the introductions.
Well, Shyamdas is a great kirtan singer, one of the greatest Western ones. No question about that. I go to his kirtans as often as I can, which is not enough, but it's great. He's also a scholar, particularly in the area of Braj and Krishna consciousness, but it goes further than that. Welcome, Shyamdas. We're really happy that you're here.
Thank you. Hari Om, Radhe Radhe, as they say in Vrindavan.
Yeah. And the first thing that we wanted to get into a little bit is before you were even, thinking of going to India, or before you were meditating, or in any way in a dharmic sort of mode or mood of your life, even before that, when you were a late teenager or whatever, what were the things that woke you up right at the beginning? They didn't just happen from nowhere, or maybe they did, but give us a little insight to the pre-India time in your life and some of the either epiphanies or dreams or visions that prompted you to enter the kind of life that you've led since then.
When I was a very young child, I always felt that I had this playmate who was unseen but was dark and blissful. And I would carry on conversations with this unseen divinity for much of my childhood, and I didn't really talk about it to anyone. And many years later, when the book Be Here Now came out, and I was drawn into that mandala, into that magical circle of Nim Crowley Baba's grace, I started to have dreams of the great master himself, Nim Crowley Baba, and he told me in a dream that I should come to India, and sort of the visions of my childhood and the direction that I needed to go seemed to effortlessly unfold, and I left home at 18, and by the time I was 19, I was in Istanbul making my way to India with a group of other Western Nim Crowley Baba followers, and we traveled through Turkey and Afghanistan, Pakistan, and ultimately arrived in India. And it was there that I had the first darshan of Nim Crowley Baba in Vrindavan, and I think it was December of 1972.
Well, that was quite a passage, right? You went overland to India. Geez, at 19 years old. That took a little bit of courage. There was something really driving you, and you say that it really was, Shyamdas, the recognition that you had of this imaginary playmate. Ramdas talks about, that's how he relates with Maharaji now. He tells people, yeah, it's just my imaginary playmate that's become something more than imaginary. But that is what drove you?
Well, I think that we have to define what's the difference between a fantasy and something that is based in soul, or what is called Atma. Because a fantasy doesn't really create, in most cases, a state of transformation. Because we can imagine that we are something. But if it doesn't have foundation in ultimate truth, if we can use that word, it just remains, on that very superficial level. So it was an imaginary friend, but imaginary in the sense that there was a bhav, there was a true reality, apparently.
We have to tell folks what bhav is.
Bhav, okay. So bhav is a word that, like the word guru and kirtan and dharma and words like pundit and kamarband, actually, which is another name for a bell, which you'll find in the English dictionary. I think that at some point we will find the word bhav in the English dictionary, and that is the state of devotional awareness, Bhav is a blissful cognition of God's presence. Bhav is being in the devotional state of being. It's very difficult to translate directly into English, but Bhav is basically what everyone is looking for in every spiritual practice, because Bhav has not only the state of enlightenment, Bhav encompasses love, devotion, and a feeling of God's presence everywhere. Bhav is to be in the spirit, basically. So there was some bhav attached to all of this, and so I guess whenever and wherever there is bhav, things will happen easily. And so, at 19, taking a trip, overland, I was, I think, one of the youngest Westerners to make it there at the time. It just seemed like the dharma of my soul, something that I had to do, and I didn't really find any obstruction anywhere. It just seemed like the most natural thing to do, and the gates opened everywhere I went, all the way to India. And I remember entering into India. It was like I had found the eternal abode within a material realm. The colorful turbans that the porters were wearing at the border of Pakistan and India, it was just a red carpet service all the way through.
Talk a little bit about, I remember in my experience, after I was there for about 6 months when I first went, I really had a deep feeling of contentment being there, and the thought of Canada, where I'm from, America, same, was like foreign to me. So how quickly did you fall into the familiarity of India?
I would say pretty much from the first moment.
Really?
I remember my early days in the Brindavan area. I first stayed at the Jaipuria house with the other Nim Crowley Westerners, and then somehow I was moved on to an ashram called Sham Kuti that was by the banks of the Yamuna River on the Parikrama path that encircles the sacred town of Brindavan, maybe a mile down the path from the ashram where we all went to meet Bala. And in the morning, I would often hang out on the banks of the Yamuna River, and I remember how it was so natural to be lying in the sands in the state of devotion and contemplation and oneness with all things that I was experiencing without any effort at all, was something that I could never do in the West when I was, practicing Ashtanga or meditation or pranayama. So I forgot, about Western life, not totally, but it certainly wasn't really something that I was anxious to return to, and that's why, I basically lived in India, except for a 2-month return to the States when my visa expired in '73. I stayed in India for maybe 7 or 8 years, and I didn't really have any interest in returning. And actually, I got to the point because I was living in a small village of Jatipura, and outside of the Brindavan city limits, and I was the only Westerner living in that region at that point, and Westerners looked to me like foreigners. I would occasionally see a Western person, and they seemed like they were from another planet. And I forgot how to speak American English. And I remember my mother, who was the Secretary of the State of Connecticut at that point, was featured in People's Magazine, and there was an article about her, and it had her, playing golf and holding a tennis racket, and she was wearing, kind of a tennis skirt, and I couldn't believe that my mother was wearing, such a short skirt. It seemed to be the most bizarre thing I had ever seen. So I think maybe I went a little bit overboard, but that was due to the fact that I was so absorbed into the devotional culture of India. And in the end, we're all looking for nirodha, which is absorption into God. And I think that, location has a lot to do with it. If you can stay in a holy place and be surrounded by people who have similar goals and are exalted in their own states of consciousness, it really helps.
Hey, take us on you wake up in the morning, you're first in Vrindavan, say, and you wake up in the morning, after the sun rises or as the sun rises, and walking through those streets, going down to the parikrama, which is the circular path that goes around the holy part of the city. Just give us a visual tour.
Well, I lived in that ashram which I mentioned called Sham Kuti, the cottage of Krishna, basically. And I would go out every morning just before sunrise, and I would walk around the city on the parikrama path. And that was about a 7-mile walk that took about 2.5 hours. And I would be joined by maybe 50 pilgrims, and they would be chanting, Radhe Sham, 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 Radhe, Radhe. And then the people who were walking just in back of them, they would respond by saying, Radhe Krishna, 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 Radhe, Radhe. And, Vrindavan has changed quite a bit since those days. Then it was really like a village. It was a town, and there wasn't very much electricity, and there were groves everywhere and ashrams nestled in the forest to the right and to the left of the parikrama path, and there would be obviously the monkeys were there then as well, and the Yamnaji River meandering to the left, and all of the amazing temples that you would pass through when you headed down towards the Yamuna River. I could write a novel about it. There were so many things going on at that point. The peacocks singing. Basically, the thing which sticks in my mind the most is the chanting of the pilgrims as we walked around this amazing path, and the 2.5 hours passed basically in a flash because we were absorbed in the joys of chanting the sacred names.
Let's talk a little bit about Krishna, as if, we just didn't know anything about him, because Vrindavan obviously was the place of the birth of Krishna. But if you would, give us just a little talk about who this deity is and was.
Krishna. So, if we look at the word Krishna, so Krish means all attractive, to attract literally, and Na means, in Sanskrit, means bliss. So Krishna is the all-attractive one. Krishna is spoken about in the Sanskrit literature as more beautiful than 1,000,000,000 cupids. Krishna is not only the embodiment of perfect beauty, but is the Lord of all yogis. Krishna represents in the bliss body the abode of liberation, and in the devotional sense, Krishna represents the perfect consort, or the perfect master, or the perfect Swami, or the perfect son, or the perfect Lord. Krishna responds specifically to the way that the individuals worship him. That is why Krishna is comprised of sheer bhav, of sheer devotion, and is most expert at responding to the intentions of the spiritual aspirant. So those who view Krishna as the absolute reality, devoid of name or form, what is called the Nirgun Brahman, the abode of absolute liberation, Krishna becomes that reality, that state of enlightenment for those people. And for those people who love Krishna as the embodiment of beauty, as being the Lord of liberation, but also the perfect responder to devotional attitudes, Krishna appears exactly and probably in a more exact, in a more exalted fashion than we can even imagine. Krishna is the foundation of Vrindavan, and Krishna, according to the Vaishnava traditions, Krishna is not considered to be an avatar, doesn't appear from time to time. Krishna is the source of all incarnations, and therefore Krishna is considered to be Adi Purusham, is the primal being, sometimes called also Narayan. That's just the beginning of the story. Krishna is the subject of most of our devotional poetry, and Krishna is certainly the object of the yogi's contemplation and the devotee's devotion.
Thank you thank you. That's beautiful. Thank you, Shyamdas. Just a little interrupt here. Shyamdas's multiple CDs and books, you can find out about all of them on shyamdas.com. A lovely website, I might say, very clear, and you'll just expand your knowledge of Shyamdas and of many other things if you go to that website. While we're at it, we should mention that our dear sponsors, audible.com, they are our sponsors, and they offer a free month of trial membership in audible.com if you just go to their site, audible.com, and you get a free book in that. And you can choose from a pretty vast, over 100,000 titles within that.
Actually, you have to go to Mindrolling.
That's right.
Podcast.com, because that's where you'll find the link to the Audible trial, actually. So
Right.
we have to keep mentioning it. I forget that.
Yeah.
So do you have something to recommend on that? Or?
Well,
today.
There are many spiritual books on there by particularly Buddhist masters. Pema Chodron has 19 titles. Ramdas has about 17 or 18, but you can check for yourself.
Shyamdas, you have to get somebody to read one of... Shyamdas has several... if you, as David said, if you want to find out a lot more about this particular culture, if you can call it that, of Krishna, you certainly should go to the site, to Shyamdas's site and pick one up. But Shyamdas, you should absolutely get one going there with Audible and get somebody to read it. It would be a wonderful contribution. Now, one of the things in terms of when I went to India recently, not more than, I think it was 3 years ago, that I met up with Shyam in Vrindavan, and he was just describing what it is there. Now, it has lost a little of that luster from when we were first there. That's true, but that spirit still lives in there as you walk through those streets, and that chanting that goes on comes from such a deep place that you cannot be anything but affected by that spiritual feeling called Bob. And Shyamdas took a little group of us, my wife and a couple other people, on a tour that day through a village where he has lived for many years. And there is, and we're not saying enough about Shyamdas's integration into this culture. He speaks perfect Hindi and can go to places that no Westerners really can go to, and led us to some of these spots that no Westerns even know of. This I could tell just being with you, Shyam, it was a joy, and that you've done many times before. I mean, some of the spots it was like you just going there the first time yourself. And that's a joy that you have shared with other people, including some celebrities from the West that have been interested, like Sting and so on. Tell us a little about how you've done this over the years and some of the people that you've introduced to this culture.
Well, things that we love, we tend to want to share with other people who have an appreciation for such things. And the realm of Vrindavan, and I wanted to add on our morning walk around the sacred city, that just every grain of sand in the Vrindavan region emanates with the bliss Vrindavan area, whether it be the city of Vrindavan or the town of Gokul or by the Govardhan Hill or Barsana, which is the town that's Radha's town, or Kamvan, the forest of desire, wherever you wander in that Braj area, which is 168 miles in circumference, we feel, or I feel, if the day is good, some sort of incredible magic that is arising from the lands because of not only did Krishna herd his cows and play with the gopis in that amazing region, but that an incredible amount of saints and realized beings have also taken the shelter of that land. And we know that Nim Crowley Baba rushed back to Vrindavan because he wanted to leave his mortal body there, and that his samadhi is also there as well. And there was good reason for that. So I'm always inspired to have guests who are interested in experiencing the joys of the sacred soils. And over the years, all sorts of people have visited me. Of course, Sting has visited me in the Brudge area, and David and Sharon, and you have come. Christy Turlington came and visited me there. All sorts of individuals. Bob Thurman came, Mike Diamond
really?
from Beastie Boys. But really, the real fame is in the land itself, because every other fame has in it a certain time limit, and then afterwards the fame of an individual will eventually diminish or increase. But the fame of the Brudge area, of the Vrindavan area, is always resplendent. And personally, there is no greater joy for me than to share that excellence and illumination with other people who are ripe for the voyage. And I do remember the day that you and I and a few other people, we walked from the town of Gokul, and we went to Brahman Ghat, and from Brahman Ghat we went to Yogipur, and from there we walked to the banks of the Yamuna River in this very isolated ashram with a huge banyan tree and this idyllic Shiva temple in the middle.
Oh, it was
so
We
beautiful.
climbed down the banks to the Yamuna River, which is the river of grace and love, and we meandered on her rich sands for a mile or two. And there was nothing to be said, there was nothing to be explained, because the presence of that arena speaks for itself, and I consider it really to be an act of grace in the end. And that's what the Vrindavan experience is about. It's not attained through a sadhana, through a particular method. It is attained by those who are interested in tasting the bliss of God. And then Bhagavan, Ishwara, Govinda, who is called by so many names, Ram as well, responds to the inner desires of the ignited soul. And so I wish that I have that company forever.
That's so. One thing you have been in recent years, as the chant scene has grown in the U.S. particularly. It's an amazing thing how much chant is going on, called kirtan, in America, and that's proven to be a vehicle for many people. I would have to say that the people that come from Maharaji, from Neem Karoli Baba, from those days, have been the leaders in this area, and we're talking about, from Jai Uttal to Krishnadas to you, etc. I want to get some feedback from you about the people that have been showing up to your kirtans and live events, and I know you've been participating in some of the major festivals of that. First of all, it's a two-pronged question. I mean, I have sometimes a little bit of a problem with what and it's judgmental, and I know I'm going to, I'm going to go to a bad place for some of the bad thoughts that I've had about some of our dear friends and family. So, but I have to say, it's a little too new agey. It's a little too saccharine. It's more about tribal and it's jazz and rock and roll, and it's not about what the practice is. There are very few of us, shall we say, that are doing the practice, in my mind. And again, this is all judgmental, because I will tell you one experience that I had back in the day in India with a good friend that was part of our group, and in that day, I don't know, Shyam, if you remember that Hare Krishna cult movie that was in that Bollywood movie. Mamadam Hare Krishna Hare Ram. Yes, exactly. And so we were going by the theater, this friend and I, and some of these guys came, it had about hash smoking and hippies, and in this movie, and so these young Indians came, just in front of the theater when they saw us, supposed hash smoking hippies, which we were as well, but they just raised their hands in that gesture of smoking a pipe, a chillum, and I went and said, "Screw off, you rascals," or whatever I said. And my buddy because they were jiving us, going Hare Krishna Hare Ram, and my buddy in the rickshaw said, "What are you, crazy? It's the name. It doesn't matter where it's coming from." So I always take that as my personal admonishment for judging, kirtanwalas and singers. So, but what is your take on the the pull that you feel especially from younger people about imbibing this tradition and this practice, and how real is it, and so on?
Yeah. Well, let me start that. When I lived in India for maybe 10 or 15 years, and I didn't really come back to the States until sometime in the 80s. And I came back, and I checked out the yoga scene, and I didn't see any chanting going on there. And I was a chanter, so I thought, the best place to do a chant is obviously in a yoga studio. And I think I was one of the first people to do it. So I started to lead kirtan at Jivan Mukti. And it was just David and Sharon and my son and Eddie. There was like 5 of us, and we did it on a Monday night. And we, and after a year or so, it was 20 people. And then after 2 years, it was 30 or 40 people. And then Krishna came in one night and said, "Shyam, this is a great idea." And then he started to take that over, and Jai came, and Bhagavan Das came, and of course, people were chanting many years before that. Ram Das and KD were chanting on their tours years before that. But it seemed that the yoga scene was the place to bring the chant, because the asana yoga, which comes from the Ashtanga system, in India, I went to India thinking that I was going to find a bunch of, Ashtanga yogis, people doing asana.
We should explain, actually, Shyam, just for everybody, that when you refer to asana and ashtanga, you're referring to the practice of hatha yoga, physical yoga within the ashtanga system,
which is the physical positions that are so important. But I only saw people doing chant, largely, and so when I came back, I figured that this is the place to do it, because they're already doing some yoga, and the real sort of the inner devotional practices would be found more in the chant. And so people at first, I think, were not used to hearing chant, but then slowly, as we did it more and more, and as more and more people joined in, it became, an accepted practice. Now, getting to your question, where it's kind of new agey and there's heavy beat and drum sets, and it's sort of, it's become new agey, and people are, maybe presenting the chant in ways that would raise the eyebrows of some chant masters in India. So it's possibly true, but, I do have to agree a bit with the person who told you that, look, however the person is taking the name, if they are taking it in jest, or if they're taking it seriously, or if they're taking it with knowledge, or if they're taking it without any knowledge, whether they are doing it with completely pure intention, whether or not their motives are mixed because they want to receive some worldly benefit from it. In every case, there is some sort of benefit. Now, obviously, we would like to see everyone chant with the highest intentions and with the best bhav, but I think it's a process. So that as I tour around, and I've been involved with the major chant festivals from the beginning, Omega Ecstatic Chant, as well as Sridhar's Bhakti Fest, and I've seen these chant events grow. I have to say that I'm really happy to see people's interest. Now, obviously, not everyone's going to get the full juice of the chant from the first day, so that people are in a progression here. And I do remember Dum Ara Dum, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, Mitagai, I heard that for years and years, and that was sort of negative towards the people who were chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. But in the end, if we look at the way that the Hare Krishna mantra is received today in India, I mean, that, people respect Westerners chanting that mantra so much in India now. So we are part of a movement. We are part of a transition of a yogic progression where we are, I think, as Westerners, and in many cases we are the first generation to bring this sort of yogic practice, the bhakti yoga, the path of love, over to the West. So it's only natural that we are going to have people who are doing it from a worldly viewpoint, people who are doing it from a scriptural viewpoint, and those who are doing it from God's grace. And we have to accept all of them, but keep our sights, I think, on the highest bhav.
Well, listen, you have. I'm feeling way more balanced about this after your talk here, Shyamdas, because I've had a lot of guilt over these thoughts that I've had, and you have straightened some of that out. So this is a good thing because, it's been.
There isn't even a word for guilt in Sanskrit.
There's it in Yiddish. There is.
In Yiddish, there is.
Oh boy.
In Sanskrit.
Well, that's great. Listen, again, to those of you that are listening, there really isn't anybody with this kind of knowledge that I know of from the West that Shyamdas has about this tradition. I mean, it's extraordinary, really, and that it's available here, and you can look out for whenever he's going, publicly going around. When are you going back to India?
Well, I hope to go back in early November. Every year I tour in the West, in these various yoga centers and events for 5 or 6 months, and then I kind of retire to the banks of the Yamuna River or to the side of the Govardhan Hill or by Maharaji's ashram in Vrindavan, where I spend 5 or 6 months, where I study classical music, I write books, and I've been hosting a lot of people. People come and visit me pretty much every day. We have sometimes 5, sometimes 30 people for lunch, and so
that's another thing. If you get to go to, if we got to go, Shyamdas is an extraordinary cook too. So I don't think we'll give your address out because there might be a too big a stream of people, trying to get over there. But listen, one interesting thing, I'll in closing this, which we're going to do here. When one of the best statements, because Shyamdas and I were in India. We weren't there at the same time. I had left India before he came. but we had the exact same experience, sharing that love that was shared. I mean, it was best said, Larry Brilliant, who was part of the group when we were in India at the time, he said it best. Neem Karoli Baba loved me, but that was his gig. That was his job. I didn't seem very, miraculous the way that I felt and what I got. But when I felt that same thing around, and I loved everybody that the 20 or 30 Westerners that were sitting there at the time, the way that we were bonded, that was a miracle. That was something I had never, I don't think, Shyamdas, I don't know. I don't think we've seen each other in a few years. And the real miracle is that when any of us see each other, and it doesn't have to be that it was a physical meeting with this being. Anybody. There are there's thousands of people who met him through dreams and so on that have the same kind of relationship and recognize that shared love. And that's really what it's all about. And I think at the core, that is the essence of the teachings. Would you agree that you have been participating in for all of these years?
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, the land of Vrindavan and Nim Kroli Baba are identical. What it is that you can try to attain spirituality through a particular method or a practice, but very slow. I mean, why not go for grace? Why not go for bhav, for the direct experience? And Maharaji, I think, did not look specifically at our eligibilities, whether or not we had done a lot of practice, whether or not we were pure beings. He gave many of us gifts of devotion and experience of God's presence that were beyond our reach, because he was able to give something that was priceless. And basically, we were and remain followers, and that's what I think the tradition is about. It's about being a Das. We all seem to have the same last name, whether it's Ram Das or Shyam Das or Krishna Das or Bhagavan Das. Everyone's got the same last name because we are followers and we are part of this amazing whole. And to have the camaraderie, or what is called in Sanskrit the satsang, the good association of other ignited beings who are in that same space, represents, I think, the body of the Guru. I was just at Tom Lesser's Bandara on Saturday, and it was interesting to see. There were maybe 150 of us there. It just seemed like it was the body of the Guru had manifested, and the good spirit and the goodwill amongst all the people there, because we are operating on a level of bhav. We're operating on a level where we view each other not as personalities with complications, but as God's flowers that have manifested here on this earth to play in this incredible Leela of life. And I am full of gratitude to know you.
Beautiful. Yes. David, what your last words?
My last word is pretty simple. That, everything that Raghu and Shyam have talked about the Nim Karoli group and others in India is obviously true and quite radiantly beautiful. But I would say this, just as an addition, that when I go to Kirtan, I live in New York City, and when Shyam does Kirtan in New York City, sometimes because of the stresses of city life and being in the media as I am and so forth, I'm pretty cranky and don't want to go to any Kirtan or anything. And we're friends, so Shyam will pick me up. And between my house and where the studio where Shyam is chanting, by the time we get there, I'm laughing beyond anything. It's just so great to be around Shyamdas. But I think I represent people who can come to the Kirtan, who've never been to India, never been to anywhere for that matter. The fact is that he makes it clear at the beginning, you make it clear at the beginning of your Kirtans, that you just come and you sing. No other responsibilities, no knowledge needed, just the openness, open-heartedness to listen and chant. And I guarantee that at the end of it, because if it can work with me, it can work with anyone. I come out of it, I'm feeling lighter, less judgmental. There's less static running around my system. Just feel better and happier. Put it that way. And for that, I thank you, Shyamdas.
Thank you,
forever.
Shyamdas. And
I'd like to pick you up on Saturday if you are in New York. I'm doing a kirtan at Dharma Mitra's. I think it's at 7 o'clock.
Yes, we had such a good time there last time. I will be back on Saturday afternoon, so we'll go.
all right, you guys can make your arrangements later. Hey, you can on our little podcast here. But also, please go to mindrollingpodcast.com because we will also put up some of Shyam's music. Shyamdas will put up a few songs so you can get the idea of just how deep that emotional expression of what he has garnished after all these years in that area of India is, instead of the words, because the music, the chant will take you right there. So please, mindrollingpodcast.com, and we thank you for being with us.
Thank you, and Radhe Radhe. Jai Shri
Radhe,
Krishna.
Radhe Shyam.
Radhe Shyam.
Bye-bye.